motherfucker! Here's some f***ing news! The deep state is coming after your fetuses. A cabal of candy cane are politely stepping on your neck and tits and balls from their shadowy vantage behind the curtain of false justice. Our only hope is to burn them out like ticks and then wash ourselves in the sweet juices of our celebratory orgies and bloat in the afterglow of feasts and decadence like the pulp-filled bellies of Satan's.
Hey, what the hell is this?
Oh, hello there, friend. How are you this wonderful afternoon?
I step away for a second. Are you trying to host my show?
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm just trying to f***ing educate people about deep state and how the Koch brothers are coming for the fetuses and your sex and your kids probably and teaming up with the FBI and Opus Dei to form a shadow society bent on keeping you all the way down, man. Hiding the truth, assassinating Thomas Hanks. Gotta tweet, gotta tell the world with the tweets.
Opus Dei, like in the Da Vinci Code? Aren't you that dystopian alternative future version of me that blinked out of existence right before the election? How are you still around?
I got no idea who you're talking about, bro! I'm the alternate future version of you that ordered a grilled cheese instead of a Reuben last week and spun off into chaos. Like that movie Sliding Doors! I'm Sliding Doors, Cody! Here to remind you that you're always a f***ing deli beat away from rattling off the rails and into the ditch of truth about how the conservative deep state is totally real and exists to undermine Joe Biden. I mean, undermine him more than he already does to himself, you know.
Sure.
Did you see when he tripped?
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Hey, listen, you're definitely my favorite alternate universe version of me, but we probably shouldn't start blaming the deep state on stuff when the Dems are in power. That's like MAGA junk. Also, I gotta do a show, so not really the best time.
Whatever you say, sheepy. Listen, why don't you go host your cute little piss show, and I'll just be over here when you need me. And you will need me.
Sorry about that, folks. I mean well, but I have no self-control. And I assure you that we're not gonna devolve into deep state rants because of a sandwich choice or whatever the hell. I'm balanced, been eating well-ish, sleeping enough. All right, I'm not a healthy man, but not like teetering over the edge, right? Am I right? Anyway, here's some news. Brett Kavanaugh is still around. Okay, seeing his face, that kind of pushed me toward the edge. I see now how easy it would be. But remember having to look at this saggy dip all the time and how he was accused of attempted rape and then freaked out when asked about his drinking habits and then wept about a calendar right before getting a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court, and now he's just interpreting laws. That's fun to think about. Well, now there's been a tad bit of chatter about how maybe, possibly, the FBI fudged their probe into allegations against Kavanaugh during his nomination process. At the time, FBI Director Christopher Wray said that the investigation was limited in scope and is now being accused of never properly answering congressional questions about the details of this background check. It's all just conjecture at the moment, but also interesting that before running the FBI via Trump's nomination, Christopher Wray was a lawyer who represented Chris Christie during Bridgegate, and before that was a law clerk for Judge J. Michael Luttig, a man known for being a pro-capital punishment feeder judge, aka a judge whose clerks would often go on to the Supreme Court, specifically in this case as conservative clerks. Point being that the current FBI director who did the background check, on Kavanaugh has a history of working within the legal system on the side of conservative interests. But it's not like FBI is the deep state stuff. I'm not trying to pull anything like that. It's just, you know, it's interesting. I just think it's neat information. Nothing over the edge, all right? We're squarely on the reasonable side of the edge. I mean, I'm sure there's a perfectly rational explanation for why in 2017 Brett Kavanaugh reported owing $60,000 to $200,000 in debt, and then that debt suddenly vanished the following year when he was nominated to the Supreme Court. I'm sure someone during his nomination asked him about that, right? Not at all. That's interesting.
Oh, hey, just jumping in to see how it's going. Learn about any mysterious and large amounts of money vanishing, weird FBI stuff perhaps, eating Thomas Hanks, anything like that coming to mind, you fucking puppet!
Don't call me a puppet, man. I'm not some wormbo. I'm definitely not saying that things are rosy or perfect, but I'm not going to immediately subscribe to conspiracy theories either. Like, yeah, of course something is up with Kavanaugh, and this whole episode is going to be about dark money in the courts, but let's maybe cool it on the deep state stuff. And seriously, don't call me a puppet.
Oh yeah, no problemo, big guy. Didn't know you were a puppet, racist.
I'm not, all right? I have puppet friends. Look, you might be wondering why I'm stirring up Kavanaugh stuff now, and I don't know, perhaps it's because we didn't make a big enough stink about it at the time, and the problems that happened around his nomination, like the really scary problems, they didn't really get resolved or addressed much, probably because we were all enamored by the brewski tales of PJ and Squee. That scary problem mainly being that, along with his sexual assault claims, there was a disturbing amount of dark money being used to fund Kavanaugh's nomination, as in donations to groups behind things like pro-Kavanaugh ads that can't be traced back to anyone because their source wasn't disclosed. But in a lot of cases, it came from just one or two sources. Rich people, perhaps with corporate interests, who clearly had a lot riding on the Supreme Court swinging one particular way. And just recently, the Senate Judiciary held a hearing about dark money in the Supreme Court, and no one really batted an eye, which is a shame because it's not just Kavanaugh or even the Supreme Court this is an issue with. And in fact, many believe that the entire judicial system is slowly becoming a vessel for GOP and corporate interests. And that's, perhaps, bad. And maybe we should stop that from happening. That opinion piece I just showed is by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who describes a single unknown donor giving $17 million to block the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland before giving another $17 million toward the campaign for Kavanaugh. This claim and entire op-ed was later fact-checked as true. That there sure seems to be a web of so-called non-profit conservative groups who legally aren't required to disclose donations that are then funneled straight into efforts for tilting the court to the right. At the time of his presidency, these groups were directly tied to now-loser Donald Trump and advised him in his Supreme Court picks. But interestingly, they weren't conceived from Trump, and the people involved held power long before his escalator descent into conservative hearts and minds. In other words, this is a powerful and less discussed group of conservatives pushing specific policy on the courts and the White House. I'm talking, in part, about the Federalist Society. Founded in the 80s, the Federalist Society is an organization of mostly conservative and libertarian law nerds who share an interest in an originalist interpretation of the Constitution, meaning that they interpret the Constitution based on the context of when it was written, rather than the context of current times. It's a silly idea, in that it ignores the basic way in which a society progresses and assumes that the Founding Fathers wouldn't understand the concept of how time works, and that people living in piss and shit 300 years ago had only the best ideas. But, to be fair, a lot of originalists are able to cohabitate this belief with other objectively good advancements like civil rights. But anyway, I'm not here to do a takedown of this silly belief, but rather explain to you what the Federalist Society is, and that their organization has spread to over 200 student chapters at law schools across the nation, resulting in roughly 70,000 working lawyers who are ex or current members, including this guy. You know the guy. He's the guy we've been talking about. Brett something. With the face and the sexual assault. Tobin's workout friend. Thank you. Okay. Also, a guy who was a member, or rather more than a member, is Leonard Leo, co-chairman and former executive vice president of the Federalist Society. And while there's a lot of other stuffy turds we could discuss, Leonard is the specific turd we'll be focusing on. For starters, he's the guy behind the Freedom and Opportunity Fund, a dark money group designed to boost Trump's Supreme Court picks. I mentioned that Leonard is formerly the vice president of the Federalist Society, and that's because he recently retired to form the public relations firm CRC Strategies, which works with the Federalist Society as well as the Judicial Crisis Network, another dark money group that, along with pushing for Kavanaugh, spent thousands on ads warning people of the dangers of mail-in voting. Because they care about your safety. Surely that's why. Oh, right, and perhaps most notably, Leonard Leo was the fucking advisor to President Trump who supplied him with the list of Supreme Court nominees he would eventually pick from. Now, that really bears repeating. Leonard Leo is the person responsible for compiling nominees for Donald Trump's Supreme Court picks. Because Lord knows, Trump wasn't going to do that himself, and wouldn't you know it, all of those nominees having either spoken at or attended Federalist Society events. In fact, of all of the judges that Donald Trump nominated to federal appointments, all but one are or were members of the Federalist Society. But Trump must really love that group. And this Leonard Leo fellow, huh? How did he get so popular, do you think? Is it because of his weird double name? We should probably ask him.
How did you end up in the position of directing and guiding and advising the President of the United States on his judicial appointees?
I have no idea. What I do know is that the Federalist Society distinguished itself as an institution that was a magnet for some of the best legal talent in the country. And so I think presidents naturally looked to the Federalist Society for that kind of talent.
Oh, he's charming. So Leonard claims he has no idea why Trump found him, but thinks it might have to do with all the remarkable talent surrounding the Federalist Society. Or, I don't know, maybe also there's the fact that he donated $1 million to Trump's campaign through a dummy corporation called BH Group. Who can say, right? It is a mystery. Just a weird coincidence that Leonard Leo was also an outside advisor to the George W. Bush White House and colleague and friend to Bush's White House staff secretary, a man who helped win the Florida recount named, Brett Kavanaugh. That's easy to remember. Anyway, Brett went on to be nominated by Bush for the U.S. Court of Appeals and then did something else after that. It kind of feels like we aren't nominating people to serve on the Supreme Court based on their judicial experience so much as a history of loyalty toward the party in power. That's weird. That's so weird. But hey, first, an ad. Hi, welcome. It's just me. We're not doing like a character? Okay. Hi, welcome to the ad, where I say that I've teamed up with Skillshare. The first 1,000 subscribers who click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Just click the link in the description or go to http://skl.sh/somemorenewsapril. They got video editing, they got productivity, they got music lessons, and more is what they got. Skillshare, is an online learning community with thousands of classes to inspire your creativity, or just make you more productive, develop your skills, explore new skills, things like that. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads. I wonder what that's like. Anyway, they're always launching new classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. They've also added new live classes so you can connect with popular teachers and learn along with other members. I took a class called Simple Character Animation, Create a Walk Cycle with Duick from Fraser Davidson, and it changed, not my life, but it did change the amount of time I have to spend on making something like this. Do this! It seriously saved me so much time. There are better ways to do things! Who knew? The first 1,000 subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity, or go to http://skl.sh/somemorenewsapril. Not sure where I just went or came from. But anyway, at the end of the day, Leonard Leo, a man we did not elect, is now single-handedly responsible for over 1/3 of the Supreme Court. And that's f***ing weird, isn't it? You know, considering how you probably haven't even heard him speak much or know what he or his associates believe in. So let's, try to figure that out. A task that is actually easier said than done, as evidenced by the previous clip of him lying through his teeth. That was from PBS's Firing Line, in which Leonard spent most of his time trying to appear extremely impartial while brushing off any concerns of a conservative tilt in the courts.
I would say, a very large number of Federalist Society members probably view Roe v. Wade as wrongly decided. When you ask the second question, which is, well, does that mean it should be overturned? I don't know where a lot of our members would stand. I think many, many of our members, however, and I would include myself among them, believe that at the end of the day, the abortion issue is not going to be resolved by the court. At the end of the day, what we're seeing culturally in our country is cultural and social decisions being made about the practice of abortion. And that ultimately is where this is going to be decided. It's not going to be decided by the court.
But when President Trump says he's going to appoint nominees that are going to overturn Roe v. Wade, what percentage of people on the list that was provided to him were affirmatively in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade?
The first 21, not a single one of them said anything about overturning Roe v. Wade. Here's the problem. The problem is that at the end of the day, what conservatives are saying is we believe in a court that has judges that are neutral arbiters and that are going to have to use a neutral method of interpretation. And what we're looking for are jurists who basically are going to interpret law according to text, original meaning, structure, history, tradition, due regard for precedent, and that we don't look to outcomes. And my guess is the left doesn't believe us.
Ah, yeah. See, no need to worry about Roe v. Wade because that totally probably won't be repealed in court. And why won't you libs believe us? Which is a funny thing to ask after saying that your list of judges hasn't said anything about Roe v. Wade when they actually had a lot. And in fact, since joining the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh has already voted in favor of a law that would have limited abortion clinics in Louisiana. So to affirm, yes, the left doesn't believe people like Leonard Leo because people like Leonard Leo are liars.
If a vacancy occurs in 2020, the vacancy needs to remain open until a president is elected and inaugurated and can pick.
And then what happened, Leonard? Like if, I don't know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Did they wait to nominate someone? Or did they cram through yet another conservative judge? Oh, right, it was the second one. The one where you helped Trump shove in Amy Coney Barrett with months left on his term while praising the nomination as the capstone of a more than 4-year process where the president seized upon the issue. Lion Leonard, who, when Scalia died, personally worked with Mitch McConnell to block Obama from nominating anyone to the Supreme Court for 11 months, claiming in this interview that we should wait until the next election to replace any more judges before not doing that. Because he's a liar. So yeah, now that we've established that Leonard Leo is a liar, and a very charming one at that, like, he kind of sounds like Michael Douglas and is weird, let's try to figure out what he actually believes in. And to do that, we have to go to a speech he gave for the Council for National Policy, a group of conservative and pretty shitty activists who held a closed-door gathering right before the 2020 election that featured the likes of hater of the marketplace of ideas, Charlie Kirk. Sounds like a real fun time. This was mostly a strategic political gathering discussing their chances in November. And so when Leonard spoke to them, it was what you might call a safe space. Unfortunately, this is just audio, and dull audio at that, so I just imagine it's all being said by Michael Douglas, I guess.
Much of the story of judicial overreach in the last half of the 20th century was about a court that created rights that weren't in the Constitution and deprived the people and the states and sometimes even the national government of the discretion it needed to govern our republic.
Are you still with me? I will try to do this in small bits. So he thinks that a lot of the last half of the 20th century was courts overreaching to establish new rights that weren't guaranteed in the Constitution. He never specifies what rights he's talking about, but just in case you're wondering, the last half of the 20th century desegregated schools, created equal pay for men and women, outlawed sex discrimination, outlawed certain voter suppression, expanded voting rights, guaranteed rights for people with disabilities, let LGBTQ people marry, and that Roe v. Wade thing. Again, he never specifies, but over at Firing Line, they asked him to list examples of specific rights he had an issue with. And here's what he said.
Conservatives chafed at the role of the court initially because it was creating all these rights they couldn't find in the Constitution.
Because it seems to me that that articulation really was in response to overreach of the Warren Court.
It was mostly the Warren Court, at least in modern times. This wasn't the first time in history that the court was creating rights that weren't there.
But in the modern era.
But in the modern era, it was started with the Warren Court. And what the Warren Court and the Burger Court basically did was they made rights up out of whole cloth. They impinged on the prerogatives of the states and the idea that power devolves downward. And they declined to enforce what we call the structural constitution. And that was a double whammy for freedom. And that was the problem that conservatives were addressing.
You just said they were making up rights. In the Warren Court, especially in the early years, what rights was the Warren Court making up? Which cases?
Well, to
In
give
your
you a
opinion?
great example, the Miranda warning, okay, was completely made up by the court. It's nowhere to be found. And you know, there were other aspects to the right of privacy that were largely created and could not be found in any particular part of the Constitution. But I would say that in the area of civil rights and race, those are areas where I think you can square a number of the court's decisions with the 14th Amendment. So it's complicated. The left likes to caricature objections to judicial activism by saying that we don't like any of the results from the Warren Court era, and that's not actually true.
Okay, so the specific rights he felt the courts overreached on were from the Warren Court, as in Chief Justice Earl Warren, which ended racial segregation in public schools. But also, he says the conservatives are cool with civil rights, so I guess it's not that. But then he doesn't list anything else except Miranda rights, so I guess he's against people knowing their rights when they're arrested, but doesn't actually say that either. And you kind of see how he's dancing around the question, right? How he seems to be against certain rights granted to people in the late 20th century, but won't say which ones. But he's definitely against them. To the point that, going back to his Council for National Policy speech, he outright celebrates a potential reversion in the justice system to a pre-30s era.
I think we stand at the threshold of an exciting moment in our republic. The revival of our structural constitution by the U.S. Supreme Court. A revival in those very important principles of limited constitutional government, separation of powers, federalism, enumerated powers, limits on judicial power, sovereignty. And this is really, I think, at least in recent memory, a newfound embrace of limited constitutional government in our country. I don't think this has really happened since probably before the New Deal. And I think that that as we move forward, as we cross this threshold, which I think we can, we will begin to see, I think, some fundamental changes in the way our courts deal with fundamental questions about the size and scope of government and about the nature of rights and freedoms in our country.
So he wants to bring us to a limited constitutional government akin to before the New Deal, and change the nature of rights and freedoms in this country. And again, doesn't specify what that means. And that's extra terrifying when the speech continues to the part where he lays out just how extremely influential he and his group have been on the courts.
This is the lesson we borrow from the Reagan administration, right? Judicial personnel is going to be legal policy. And so we need to continue to fight hard to transform the federal bench. We've had 2 Supreme Court appointments. About 40 Court of Appeals judges have been confirmed. We have about 12 or so in the pipeline in the Senate right now. We're likely to see at least 6 to 12 more retirements in the federal courts of appeals over the course of this year. And if all of these trend lines bear out, we can expect President Trump to have flipped approximately 1/3 or so of the federal appellate bench in his first term of office. There's an enormous amount of momentum that has taken place, and it takes a lot of energy for that to continue. So one of the things I think we as a movement have to do is we have to continue to reinforce what the president has said. We need to back him up on his commitment to appoint judges and justices who are, in his words, extraordinarily well qualified, not weak. And then finally, individuals who will interpret the Constitution the way the framers meant it to be. That's what he said 1 week after the election that he won in Trump Tower, and briefing us on what he wanted in the Supreme Court justice and what he wanted in lower federal court judges.
Because this is what it actually comes down to. Not so much a specific ideology or quest for integrity, so much as nominating their people. People who belong to their group. It's why they get behind people like Trump and Kavanaugh and plug their ears at any undesirable traits. It's why they push through people like Wendy Vitter for a federal judgeship, a woman who literally attended Planned Parenthood protests. Leonard Leo, above all else, works for his side. Not that he's expected to act otherwise, but it's pretty important to understand his singular goal. How incredibly serious he is, how influential, despite most people not knowing who he is.
I can't count the number of occasions during the judicial selection process where we have had members of our movement shooting at particular nominees, sometimes because they had another prospective nominee they wanted nominated, or because in the world we live in today, it is so easy to engage in gossip, rash judgment, detraction, outright calumny. We have to avoid that. You don't see the left usually engaging in a circular firing squad when they nominate people to the federal bench. Why in the world are we doing it? We have to trust each other better. We have to work hard to understand what our objectives are, and we have to really be single focused in our efforts to achieve our objectives here.
But in a lot of ways, we're back to where we started. We still have no clear idea of what exactly Leonard Leo, an extremely influential man, believes in. That is, besides holding the Constitution to the original context, which again is pretty silly, because the Constitution is like a mess, bro. For example, if I were to ask the Constitution if we should, say, give term limits to members of the Supreme Court, something we should definitely do, well, the Constitution would say back to me, the judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation. And literally nothing else about the matter. Just that old-timey fart breeze about good behavior, which is why we need to, go beyond the written word and make decisions based on modern times. I wonder what Leonard thinks about this.
It's a tough game to figure out whether term limits is a net gain if you're an originalist or a constitutionalist, or whether it's a net loss. It's hard to know. And as a conservative, I just prefer to stick with what we have.
Yes, I'm sure that as a conservative who also picked 3 Supreme Court justices, you would like us to stick with what we have. And that's the part Leonard is really downplaying. The fact that from what little we do know about his personal beliefs, he sure seems like a religious conservative who opposes the rights of women and LGBTQ people, and pals around with other religious conservatives who oppose the rights of women and LGBTQ people. In 2012, Leonard was on the board of the Catholic Association Foundation, which ran multiple campaigns against same-sex marriage. He was George Bush's Catholic advisor during his 2003 race, in which he proposed a ban on same-sex marriage. Even if he doesn't say it out loud, this is very clearly one of the rights that Leonard Leo thinks was a mistake of the last 50 or so years. Oh, and as an aside, back when he ran the U.S. Commission on International and Religious Freedom, Leonard was accused of anti-Muslim bias, so there's that too. Fun. And finally, of course, there's abortion. And shucks, Leonard is a director of the Beckett Fund, the law firm that represented Hobby Lobby when they didn't want to pay for contraception or abortion-related procedures. Another member of that firm is a lawyer named Ann Corkery. Remember that group I mentioned? The Judicial Crisis Network, which is tied in with the Federalist Society, and Dark Money, and Leonard, and Kavanaugh, and such. Well, the Judicial Crisis Network is run by Ann Corkery, an extremely outspoken member of Opus Dei, a religious group that is absolutely not cool about abortion and super cool about self-flagellation. To quote Ann herself back when she defended the practice, "Why do it? Not to be sadomasochistic, it's to share the great love Christ has for us. Selfishness is the enemy of love." And I'm not here to go after someone's religion, but it seemed important to show just how deep into this faith she is. A faith that super doesn't like same-sex marriage, and how her group is now using millions of dollars to shape the Supreme Court with help from Leonard Leo. her colleague, who personally picked 3 nominees. Oh, also, fun fact, the Judicial Crisis Network is funded by a second group called the Wellspring Committee, which along with funding this group, gave over $1 million to BH Group, also known as Leonard Leo's dummy corporation he used to donate to Trump, that money being roughly $1 million. And if you're wondering who runs Wellspring Committee, well, it turns out it's Ann f***ing Corkery, along with her husband. Because if you haven't figured it out yet, this is all just one small pool of ultra-religious conservatives pouring money into the courts. And that's just the names they want us to see. Because according to the book Big Money by journalist Kenneth P. Vogel, Wellspring Committee is also the name of a bogus nonprofit group created in 2008 to siphon dark money by none other than the Koch brothers.
Yeah!
I even, got Opus Dei in there, didn't I?
You sure did, f***o!
But you were wrong about Tom Hanks! No one is coming after Tom Hanks! Besides, like, Chet Hanks. But I think that's more psychological harm than anything. But okay, yes, there is a sort of conservative group influencing the courts behind the scenes that has existed longer than any recent president that you could, if you wanted to, define as a deep state.
And
they are coming for your fetuses and your sex.
yeah, welcome to the f***ing edge! And hey, guess what else, stick? Just like how they existed before Trump, these moist rags exist after Trump too. The Judicial Crisis Network has already spent a hot wad of money going after Biden's DOJ, and our pal Leonard Leo is gearing up for the fight over voting laws. Interesting detail, he disappeared during Trump's voter fraud and stormed the Capitol hogwash, and is only now starting to come back. It's almost like he knows how to survive different administrations and is really smart and terrifying and won't go away like ever. Oh, and this is all just one single cluster of f***s we're talking about, other Cody. You realize that, don't you? That this is the tip of the f***ing tankberg, and you should spend hours going through all the dark money f***s slapping the dicks on democracy? Eh?
Okay, well, what do we even do about this?
If I know, short breath! If I had to guess, we should start by adding term limits to the Supreme Court and revoke Citizens United and anything else that makes it easier for dark money groups to exist. Support motherfuckers like Sheldon Whitehouse who actually give a rat's tit about this issue. Luckily, all of these things can be done by the legislative branch provided that they're bullied enough into doing it. Ironically, limiting the power of the court like Leonard Leo wants would actually help get rid of people like Leonard Leo. Also, Justice Breyer should think about retiring, and maybe we make that a normal thing to do instead of gripping onto power until the abyss takes us at the least opportune moment. Most of all, we just need to give a about how the system works and pay better attention to what politicians are saying about the judicial branch. Like, if I know what Biden has to say about any of this, and you could argue that no one in the government wants to talk about anonymous donors since they all love the goddamn hell out of it. Maybe we could build some kind of giant machine that we all live in and worship the Greek god Plutus, deity of wealth, so that he may strike down the greedy with his mighty lasso of truth.
Okay, I think we're losing the thread, but that first stuff sounded kind of helpful. Anyway, thanks for, coming on?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Is there anything you'd like to plug?
Well, besides the dark money stuff, you can also check out my new rap album. It's dropping in November.
Okay, rap album, really?
Yeah, it's called Cody Style, with a bunch of letters that don't belong in it.
All right, then I think we're done.
All right, peace out, you goddamn puppet!
Told you to... Gah! It's just... I don't like being called something I'm not. It's not puppet related. I'm fine with puppets. I'm fine with puppets. I'm fine with puppets. Hello, and thank you for watching to the end of the video. This is the part of the end of the video where I say thanks, and like, and subscribe, and comment, and patreon.com/somemorenews, and podcast even more news, and merch store, and that is this part of the video. complete.